The eviction notice stuck to Elena Ravenna-Cross's apartment door like a death sentence. 14 days. The adhesive was still tacky on her fingertips when she clocked in for her shift at the Nocturne, the kind of upscale restaurant where a single bottle of wine cost more than her monthly rent. 3 months behind. $8,700 that might as well have been $8 million. She counted her tips in the employee bathroom before the dinner rush. $47. 6 shifts this week, and she had $47 to show for it. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting shadows under her eyes that made her look older than 26. Older and harder and more tired than anyone should look. Her phone vibrated, a text from River, her 16-year-old brother. Just one word, tired. Elena's hands shook as she typed back. Hang in there, 2 more days until your next treatment. Treatment that cost more than she made in 6 months. $127,000 in medical debt and climbing. Leukemia didn't care that she was already drowning. Leukemia didn't care that their mother had walked out when River was 3 and Elena was 13. Leukemia didn't care that their father had died building the interstate crushed between concrete and steel, leaving behind 2 kids and a mountain of nothing. The bathroom door swung open. Margaret, the floor manager, stuck her head in. Cross? You're on the Sterling party. Private dining room. And for God's sake, smile. These people tip. Elena forced her face into something that might pass for pleasant. Pasted on the mask she'd been wearing for 8 years, ever since she dropped out of community college to keep River fed and housed. The mask that said she was fine, everything was fine, nothing could touch her. She tied her black apron with practiced efficiency, smoothed down her white shirt, checked her reflection one last time. The woman staring back looked hollow, empty, like all the light had been scooped out of her and replaced with static. Just get through tonight, she whispered to her reflection. One table at a time. The private dining room glowed with old money. Crystal chandeliers threw fractured rainbows across white tablecloths. 6 women sat around a table set for 8, their jewelry catching the light like small suns. Catherine Sterling held court at the head, her diamond necklace, probably worth more than Elena would make in 5 years. Elena recognized the type immediately. Society wives and mistresses, the kind of women who lunched on salads and gossip, who measured their worth in carats and contempt. They barely glanced at her when she approached to take drink orders. To them, she was furniture, necessary but invisible. At the far end of the table sat a child. Elena almost missed her at first. The little girl was so still, so silent, perched on a chair that seemed too large for her small frame. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Her skin was pale, not the healthy pale of fair complexion, but a translucent, almost luminous white that reminded Elena of paper, of porcelain, of things that broke easily. The child's hair was black as midnight, cut in a severe bob that framed a face too solemn for someone so young. But it was her eyes that made Elena pause. They shifted between silver and deep violet, depending on how the light hit them, and they held a weight, an ancient sadness that didn't belong to childhood. Lily darling, sit up straight. The command came from a woman Elena didn't recognize, beautiful in the calculated way of cosmetic surgery and personal trainers. Her smile was warm, but her eyes were cold. She wore a designer dress that probably cost more than River's last hospital stay. The child Lily straightened almost imperceptibly, said nothing. Her hands were folded in her lap, and Elena noticed how thin her fingers were, how carefully she held herself like moving might cause pain. Wine, Catherine announced, gesturing to a bottle that had been breathing on the sideboard. The Chateau Waitress, $1,700 vintage girls, only the best for my birthday luncheon. Elena moved to pour. Her hands were steady despite the exhaustion singing through her bones. 8 years of waitressing had taught her that much. Steady hands even when everything else was falling apart. She made it through 4 glasses before Catherine's dramatic gesture sent everything sideways. And then he said, Catherine's hands swept out in emphasis, her diamond bracelet catching the chandelier light. The movement was too wide, too theatrical. Her wrist connected with the bottle. Time slowed. Elena watched the $1,700 wine begin its arc toward the floor. Watched Catherine's eyes widen in shock, then narrow in calculation. Watched the exact moment the woman decided who would take the blame. The bottle hit the marble floor. Crystal exploded. Bordeaux spread across white stone like blood. You clumsy, worthless girl. Catherine's voice sliced through the room, sharp as broken glass. Do you have any idea what you've done? Elena's jaw tightened. She wanted to point out that she hadn't touched the bottle, that Catherine's own dramatic flourish had sent it toppling. But she needed this job too desperately to speak. The eviction notice was still sticky on her fingertips. River's treatment was in 2 days. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Sterling. I'll pay for it." The words tasted like acid. "I can have it deducted from my paychecks." Catherine's laugh was sharp and brittle like ice cracking. "Your paychecks, darling. You don't make enough in a year to cover that bottle." Around the table, the other women watched with expressions ranging from amusement to pity. None of them would help. They never did. Elena had seen this play out 1,000 times in 1,000 different restaurants. The rich breaking things and the poor paying for them. "Now clean up this mess and get out of my sight." Catherine's voice dropped into something colder. "Actually, no. Don't bother. You're fired." The words landed like stones in Elena's stomach. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her brain was already calculating. $47 in tips. No job. 14 days until eviction. 2 days until River's treatment. The math didn't work. The math would never work. But then something unexpected happened. A small hand reached out and grabbed Elena's wrist. The touch was ice cold. Colder than any human hand should be. Elena looked down and found Lily staring up at her with those strange violet silver eyes. The child's grip was surprisingly strong for someone so small, so delicate. "Please," Lily whispered. The word was barely audible, more breath than sound. "Don't leave me." Something cracked in Elena's chest. She'd never seen a child look so utterly devastatingly alone. Not even in the pediatric ward where River had spent 6 months fighting for his life. This was different. This was a loneliness that went bone deep, soul deep, the kind of isolation that came from being surrounded by people who saw you as an object, not a person. "Lily, darling, release the help." The beautiful woman's voice was honeyed and cold. Elena had heard one of the other women call her Seraphine earlier. Seraphine Blackthorn. Tech mogul, social climber, and apparently connected to this strange silent child. "She's leaving now." No, the word came out stronger than before. Lily stood still, clutching Elena's hand, and something strange happened. The temperature in the room dropped. Not gradually, but instantly, like someone had opened a freezer door directly into the space. Elena's breath misted in front of her face. The other women gasped, pulling their shawls tighter. "Lily," Seraphine's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Sit down. Your father will be here soon, and you know he doesn't tolerate scenes." "I don't feel well." Lily swayed, and Elena instinctively reached out to steady her. The child's skin was cold under Elena's touch. Too cold, colder than any living thing should be. A shiver ran through Lily's small frame, and Elena felt it echo in her own bones. "You never feel well." Seraphine's voice carried an edge now sharp enough to cut. "It's always something with you. Headaches, dizzy spells, weakness. You're just seeking attention, and frankly, it's exhausting." Elena felt Lily's weight shift more heavily against her. She looked down and her heart stopped. The child's lips were turning blue. Not the faint blue of someone who'd been out in the cold. The deep, terrifying blue of oxygen deprivation. Of something fundamentally wrong. Lily's eyes were rolling back, the violet silver fading to something glassy and distant. Her entire body began to convulse in small, terrifying tremors. "She needs help." Elena's voice came out sharper than she'd intended. Professional training kicked in, the first aid certification all service industry workers were required to have. "She needs a hospital. Now. She needs to stop being dramatic." Seraphine snapped, but there was something flickering behind her eyes now. Fear, calculation, both and neither reassuring. "She's just having one of her episodes. Human hospitals can't help her anyway." The words registered somewhere in the back of Elena's mind. Human hospitals. The phrasing was wrong, off-kilter, the kind of thing you noticed in the split second before disaster struck. But Elena didn't have time to process it. Lily's knees buckled, and Elena barely managed to catch her before she hit the floor. The child weighed almost nothing, like hollow bird bones wrapped in silk and shadow. "Someone call 911, Elena shouted, lowering Lily gently to the ground. The convulsions were getting worse. The child's pulse was there, but wrong. Too slow. Too faint. And her skin was growing colder by the second, as if all the warmth was being leached out of her body. Nobody moved. Catherine and her friends watched with expressions ranging from shock to fascination, but none of them reached for their phones. Seraphine stood frozen, her champagne flute still raised halfway to her lips, like she was watching a play she'd seen before and already knew the ending. "What are you waiting for?" Elena's hands shook as she checked Lily's breathing. Shallow. So shallow. "She's dying. If she dies, she dies." Seraphine's voice was flat, emotionless, like she was commenting on the weather, not a child's life slipping away. "Her father will find another heir." The casual cruelty of it stole Elena's breath. She stared up at this woman in her designer dress and flawless makeup and saw something monstrous wearing a human face. Saw calculation in those cold eyes. Saw relief. Lily's fingers twitched against Elena's wrist. Her eyes fluttered open, silver now bright as mercury, and she mouthed a single word. Help. Elena didn't think, she just acted. She pulled Lily into her lap, cradling the child's head against her chest. She wasn't religious, had stopped believing in God around the same time her mother walked out, decided that any deity who let children suffer wasn't worth praying to. But she found herself whispering every prayer she half remembered from childhood anyway. Hail Marys and Our Fathers tangled together with desperate pleas to any power that might be listening. Please, she whispered into Lily's cold hair. Please don't take this child. Please. Lily's breathing hitched, stopped. Her eyes went glassy, unfocused, the light behind them dimming like a candle in the wind. No. Elena pressed her forehead to Lily's, feeling tears streak hot down her own cheeks. Stay. It wasn't a prayer, not a plea. It was a command, a refusal, a line drawn in the universe's sand. Stay with me. And then she didn't know why she did it. Didn't understand the instinct, couldn't have explained it if someone had asked. Elena bit down hard on her own lip until she tasted copper. Blood welled hot and bright, and she pressed her mouth to Lily's temple, letting a single drop fall against the child's ice-cold skin. Stay, Elena whispered again, and the word carried all the weight of everything she'd ever lost. Her father, her mother, her childhood, River's health, her dignity, her hope. She'd lost too much already. She refused to lose this child too. The drop of blood sank into Lily's skin like water into sand, and then everything changed. Lily gasped, a huge heaving breath that sounded like someone breaking the surface after nearly drowning. Color flooded back into her cheeks, not pink, but a living ivory porcelain come alive. Her eyes snapped open, brilliant violet now, and fixed on Elena's face with an intensity that made Elena's heart stutter. You, Lily's voice was stronger, clearer than Elena had heard all afternoon. You saved me. Behind them, someone dropped a glass. The sound of crystal exploding against marble seemed very far away. Elena barely registered it. She was too busy staring at Lily, who looked different somehow. Still pale, still ethereal, but no longer dying. No longer fading like a ghost in morning light. The child sat up, moving with a grace that seemed impossible for someone who'd been convulsing seconds ago. She wrapped her arms around Elena's neck, and Elena found herself holding this strange, impossible child, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat where there had been almost nothing moments before. How did you? Seraphine stumbled backward, her face white as bone. That's not possible. She was transitioning. She should be dead. Transitioning, the word hung in the air, weighted with meaning Elena didn't understand. What are you talking about? Elena's arms were still wrapped around Lily, protective and instinctive. What do you mean, transitioning? Nothing. Seraphine's mask slammed back into place, but not before Elena saw genuine fear flicker across her features. Lily, get up. We're leaving. No, Lily's arms tightened around Elena's neck. I'm staying with her. Your father will thank her for helping, but we need to go, now. You wouldn't give me what I needed. Lily's voice carried an authority that didn't belong to a 7-year-old child. She did. She gave me what I needed, what you wouldn't give me. The room had gone absolutely silent. Elena could feel every eye on them, every breath held every person waiting to see what would happen next. She didn't understand what was happening. Didn't understand the strange words, the colder than human skin, the way Lily had stopped breathing and then started again. Didn't understand any of it. But she understood one thing with perfect clarity: Seraphine had wanted this child to die. The doors to the private dining room burst open. The man who entered didn't walk. He prowled. 6'4" at least, wearing a 3-piece suit that probably cost more than Elena's car. His hair was black as midnight, swept back from a face that looked like it had been carved from marble by an artist who understood beauty, but not humanity. Sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, eyes that shifted from amber to gold to red, depending on how the light hit them. Every person in the room froze. Even Catherine, who had been mid-sentence in a whispered conversation with the woman beside her, fell silent. The man's presence filled the space like a physical force, like gravity had suddenly doubled. His eyes scanned the room once, quick and assessing, before locking onto the scene on the floor. Onto Elena, still on her knees, holding Lily against her chest. Onto the child wrapped around a stranger like a lifeline. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. Lily. His voice was deep, resonant, the kind of voice that made your bones vibrate. What happened? Papa. Lily's arms loosened from around Elena's neck, but she didn't let go entirely. She saved me. I was dying and she saved me. The man's gaze shifted to Elena and she felt like she'd been pinned by a spotlight. No, by something sharper, more dangerous. His eyes weren't quite right, she realized. The pupils were too large, too dark, and they caught the light wrong like a cat's eyes in the dark. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. Fast. Too fast. And then he was kneeling on the floor beside them, close enough that Elena could smell him. Cedar and smoke and something else. Something that made her hindbrain scream danger even as her body went absolutely still. Let me see her. It wasn't a request. Elena's arms tightened instinctively around Lily before she forced herself to loosen her grip. The child slid from her lap to her father's, moving with obvious reluctance. One small hand stayed extended toward Elena, patting the air until Elena moved closer. The man's hands were gentle as he examined his daughter, tilting her face toward the light, checking her pulse, her eyes, her coloring. His expression remained neutral, carefully controlled, but Elena saw his jaw tighten, saw the way his fingers trembled slightly as he brushed Lily's hair back from her face. Tell me, he said quietly. Lily's words tumbled out in a rush, the dizzy spell, the convulsions, Seraphine's refusal to help, and then Elena, the waitress who held her, who prayed over her, who whispered stay, and offered her blood. The man went absolutely still at that last part. His head turned slowly toward Elena, and she would have given anything to be anywhere else in this moment. Those strange eyes bore into her, and she felt like he could see every secret she'd ever kept, every fear she'd ever hidden. Like he was reading her soul and finding it wanting. You gave her your blood. It wasn't a question, but Elena answered anyway. I don't know why I did it. Her voice shook despite her best efforts to steady it. She was dying, and I just thought, you thought correctly. The man stood in one fluid motion, still holding Lily against his chest. The child looked tiny in his arms, delicate as spun glass. My daughter was in transition. Without blood freely given by a human with true intent to save, she would have died. The words should have sounded insane. They should have been the ramblings of someone who needed psychiatric help. But the way he said them, matter of fact and absolute, made them feel like truth, like physics, like gravity. What? Elena swallowed hard, her mouth dry. What is she transitioning into? The man's lips curved slightly. It wasn't quite a smile. Think you already know, don't you? And God help her, she did. All the pieces were there, had been there from the beginning. Lily's impossible coldness, her strange eyes, Seraphine's comment about human hospitals, the way the child's skin had absorbed Elena's blood like she was starving for it. Vampire, Elena whispered. Catherine gasped. Several of the other women made sounds of shock or disbelief, hands flying to their mouths, eyes wide. But the man's expression didn't change. Yes. He adjusted his hold on Lily, cradling her with a tenderness that seemed at odds with his severe appearance. I am Dominic Nightshade, Crimson King of the Eastern Territories. This is my daughter, Lily. His eyes locked onto Elena again, and she felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. And you, he continued, his voice dropping lower, you saved the heir to the oldest vampire throne in North America. Elena's legs were shaking so badly she didn't trust herself to stand. She remained on the floor, surrounded by broken glass and spilled wine, trying to process information that couldn't possibly be real. Vampires, vampire kings, transition, blood freely given. I don't understand. Her voice came out small. Why didn't someone help her? Why did Seraphine just... Because Seraphine hoped my daughter would die. Dominic's voice dropped 20 degrees. He didn't turn to look at his ex-wife, but Elena saw Seraphine flinch, like she'd been struck. She has a son from her previous marriage, a half-vampire who would stand to inherit if Lily were to tragically perish. Isn't that right, Seraphine? The woman's face went from white to gray. I would never, don't. The single word cracked through the air like thunder, like a whip, like the voice of God passing judgment. Elena had never heard so much rage contained in a single syllable. Don't insult me with lies. I can smell your guilt from here. Smell your relief when you thought she was dying. Dominic finally turned his full attention to Seraphine, and Elena was suddenly very glad she wasn't on the receiving end of that look. She'd never seen anyone look so utterly, devastatingly cold. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. You allowed my daughter to deteriorate for weeks, withheld the supplements she needed, dismissed every symptom. And when she finally reached the critical moment of transition, a moment that comes only once in a young vampire's life, you stood by and watched her die. She's always so dramatic. Seraphine's voice cracked on the words. I thought she was faking. I didn't think... Lily is 7 years old. She doesn't fake seizures for attention. Dominic's eyes flashed red. Actually, literally flashed like embers catching fire, like something ancient and terrible waking up behind human features. You have 60 seconds to leave this city. If I see you again, if I so much as catch your scent on the wind, I will not be responsible for what happens next. Seraphine actually ran stumbling on her designer heels, leaving her purse and coat behind. The door slammed shut behind her, and nobody spoke. The silence was thick enough to choke on. Dominic looked at the assembled women, at Catherine and her friends who'd been watching this entire scene unfold like it was dinner theater, like it was entertainment. You will forget what you saw here tonight. His voice carried a weight that made Elena's head swim like pressure, building behind her eyes. She felt something brush against her mind, gentle, as silk, insistent as iron, and then it slid away. Couldn't touch her. Couldn't stick. You will remember a child who felt ill, a waitress who helped her, and nothing more. You will not speak of vampires or blood or transition. Do you understand? The women nodded in unison, their eyes glazed and distant. Elena realized with a chill that he was compelling them. Mind control. That shouldn't be real either, but here she was watching it happen, watching him rewrite their memories with nothing but his voice. And you? Dominic's gaze found Catherine specifically, and the woman's glassy expression didn't change, but Elena saw her stiffen. You will reinstate this woman's employment with a significant raise. $85,000 annually. You will tell your friends what an exemplary employee she is. You will do this tomorrow. First thing. Catherine nodded, her voice flat and robotic. Yes, of course, tomorrow. First thing, 85,000. Good. Dominic turned back to Elena, and she braced herself for the same mental invasion, the same silk and iron pressure. But it never came. He looked at her with those strange, shifting eyes, and she felt nothing but the weight of his attention. You, he said simply, come with me. It wasn't a request, but unlike his commands to the other women, Elena felt no compulsion. No fog in her mind, just the very clear, very urgent knowledge that she had a choice, and that choice might determine the entire course of her life. She stood on shaking legs, brushed glass fragments from her black work pants. River's treatment was in 2 days. She had $47 in tips and no job, except apparently she had a job again at $85,000 a year, which would solve nothing because she just watched a man compel reality itself, and vampires were real. Vampires were real. Elena looked at Lily, still wrapped around her father's chest like a baby koala, and found the child watching her with desperate hope in those violet eyes. Found small fingers reaching for her again, patting the air, needing reassurance that Elena was still there. Despite everything, the impossibility, the danger, the absolute insanity of this moment, Elena felt something warm uncurl in her chest. She nodded. Lily beamed, and Elena thought that maybe, just maybe, she'd made the right choice. The Nocturne's back entrance led to a private parking garage, all concrete and shadow, and expensive cars gleaming under fluorescent lights. Dominic's car was a black Mercedes that probably cost more than Elena's apartment building. The driver who opened the door for them didn't blink at the sight of his employer carrying a child or at the waitress following behind like a lost duckling. Lily refused to be put down. She was wrapped around her father like a vine, her face buried against his shoulder, but she kept reaching back to make sure Elena was still there. Every few seconds, a small hand extended, patting the air, until Elena stepped close enough for Lily to touch her sleeve, to verify, to reassure herself that this strange woman who'd saved her life hadn't disappeared. Where are we going? Elena's voice sounded strange in the underground quiet, small and uncertain. Somewhere safe. Dominic slid into the back seat with practiced ease, settling Lily on his lap. The child immediately reached for Elena again. Somewhere we can talk properly. Elena hesitated at the car door. This was the moment, wasn't it? The moment where common sense should kick in, where she should thank him, politely decline, and walk away from vampire kings and dying children and blood pacts she didn't understand. But Lily's fingers were tangled in her sleeve, and those violet eyes were watching her with something that looked heartbreakingly like hope. Like Elena was the answer to a prayer, like she mattered. When was the last time Elena had mattered to someone? She got in the car. The drive took 20 minutes through increasingly upscale neighborhoods, past brownstones and boutiques, past restaurants where a single meal cost what Elena used to make in a week. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows, and Elena tried very hard not to think about what she was doing, tried not to calculate the risk, the insanity, the sheer impossibility of getting into a car with a vampire king. They reached a gated estate that looked like it had been transplanted directly from a Gothic novel. The mansion was all stone and stained glass and iron gates with crimson roses climbing the bars. It shouldn't have been beautiful. It should have been intimidating, foreboding, the kind of place where bad things happen to our foolish girls who didn't know better. But in the golden light of early evening, it looked like something from a fairy tale. A dark fairy tale, maybe, but still. The inside was surprisingly warm. Hardwood floors covered in thick Persian rugs. Furniture that was clearly antique but well-loved, worn smooth by centuries of use. Paintings on every wall, some modern, some that looked old enough to belong in museums. And everywhere, absolutely everywhere, there were books. Floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with leather-bound volumes and paperback novels and everything in between. Elena had never seen so many books outside a library. "Come on!" Lily slid down from her father's arms the moment they crossed the threshold, but immediately took Elena's hand again. Her grip was still cold, but stronger now. More alive. "I'll show you my room. I have books about horses and a telescope and a stuffed dragon named Mortimer." "Lily," Dominic's voice was gentle but firm. "Let Elena catch her breath first. She's had quite a shock." The child paused, looking between them with those two old eyes and a too young face. "Okay, but you'll stay, right? You won't leave." Elena's chest tightened. "I'll stay." Lily disappeared up a grand staircase, her energy apparently fully restored. Elena watched her go, then turned to find Dominic studying her with an intensity that made her want to either run or stand very, very still. He'd removed his suit jacket, revealing a crisp white shirt that did absolutely nothing to make him look less dangerous. If anything, it was worse. The casual elegance of it. The way the fabric pulled across his shoulders when he moved. The way those strange eyes never left her face. "You're not afraid." He said it like he was solving a puzzle. Like she was a problem he couldn't quite figure out. "Everyone else in that room was terrified of me, of what I am, but you aren't." Elena considered this. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was racing. Every survival instinct she possessed was screaming at her to run. "I probably should be," she admitted. "Yes, you probably should." He moved to a bar cart in the corner, poured 2 glasses of something amber and expensive looking, handed one to Elena. Their fingers brushed and his skin was cold. So cold. She suppressed a shiver. "But you're not," he continued. "Why, boy?" Elena took the glass but didn't drink. Looked at this impossible man, this vampire king, this father who just banished his ex-wife for trying to murder his daughter. "You love your daughter," she said simply. "I saw it." The way you looked at her touched her. You were gentle. Dominic's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Something that might have been surprise. "I've killed for less than what was done to her tonight," he said quietly. "Maybe." Elena met his gaze steadily. "But you didn't kill anyone. You just scared them." She paused, choosing her words carefully. Monsters don't cradle their children like they're the most precious thing in the universe. The silence stretched between them, weighted with something Elena couldn't name. Dominic raised his glass in a small salute before taking a drink. When he lowered it, his expression had shifted, softened just slightly, a barely perceptible easing of tension in his shoulders. "You're observant." "I'm a waitress," Elena said. "It's literally my job to read people." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Fair enough." They stood in silence for a moment. Elena realized she was still holding wine glass fragments in her apron pocket from the nocturne. She pulled them out carefully, looking for somewhere to dispose of them, and Dominic took them from her without comment. His fingers brushed hers again. Cold. So cold, but not unpleasant. Just different. "What happens now?" Elena asked. "Do I get my memory erased too?" "No." He set the glass shards aside with deliberate care. "You saved my daughter's life with a gift freely given. That creates a bond in vampire society. A debt that can never be fully repaid." His eyes found hers again, and Elena felt the weight of centuries in that gaze. "I couldn't compel you even if I wanted to, and I don't want to." "Why not?" "Because Lily needs you." The words came out flat, factual, but Elena heard something underneath them, something that might have been grief. Her mother died 2 years ago, cancer. Very rare for vampires, but it happens. Dominic turned away, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that seemed almost human, almost vulnerable. Seraphine was supposed to be a stepmother, a guardian, someone to help Lily through the transition years. Instead, she tried to let my daughter die. Elena's grip tightened on her glass. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry." Dominic's voice hardened. "Be here." He turned back to face her, and the intensity in his eyes stole her breath. "Lily bonded with you tonight. Not just because you saved her, but because you held her, comforted her, whispered to her like she mattered. She does matter. I know that. You know that. His jaw tightened. But Seraphine spent 6 months making her feel like a burden, like an inconvenience, like something to be endured rather than cherished. He moved closer and Elena had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Lily has been withdrawing for weeks, barely eating, barely speaking. Tonight was supposed to be an outing to cheer her up. Instead, it nearly killed her. Elena thought about Lily's cold hand in hers, the desperate whisper, "Don't leave me," the absolute certainty that no one cared if she lived or died. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "Nothing you don't want to give." Dominic's voice was careful now, measured. "But if you're willing, if you can stand to be in this world for a while, I'd like to hire you as Lily's companion, her governess. Whatever title makes you comfortable." Elena's brain stuttered. "You want to hire me to spend time with your daughter?" "I want to give my daughter someone who sees her as a child, not a political pawn or an inconvenience. Someone who will hold her when she's scared, who will whisper stay when the world tries to take her away." His voice dropped lower, rougher. "Someone like you." The offer hung in the air between them. Elena knew she should ask about salary, responsibilities, living arrangements. All the practical questions a rational person would ask. Instead, she said, "I have a brother, 16, leukemia, $127,000 in medical debt." Dominic didn't even blink. "Done. I'll have my people contact the hospital tonight. His treatment will be covered. All of it. Past, present, and future." Just like that, like it was nothing. Like erasing 6 years of crushing debt or was as simple as making a phone call. "Just like that," Elena whispered. Dominic stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact, close enough that she could smell cedar and smoke and danger. "I'm one of the wealthiest beings in North America, Elena. Money is the least interesting thing I can offer you." He paused, letting that sink in. "But if it helps your family, then consider it the first installment on a debt I'll spend centuries trying to repay." Centuries. Right. Because he was immortal. Because vampires were real and she was standing in one's house being offered a job by a king. Her life was supposed to be small, manageable, paycheck to paycheck and hoping for the best. Working herself to the bone and still falling short. Watching River waste away while she counted pennies. Dying slowly from the weight of it all. But standing here in this impossible moment, Elena realized she'd stopped feeling numb the second Lily's hand found hers. Stopped feeling hopeless when those violet eyes opened and the child whispered thank you, like Elena was the answer to a prayer. Maybe she'd been waiting her whole life to matter to someone. Maybe that was worth the risk. "I have one condition," Elena said. Dominic's eyebrows rose slightly. "Name it." "I'm not doing this because you're rich or powerful or because you can compel people with your mind." Elena squared her shoulders, meeting his gaze directly. "I'm doing this because Lily deserves someone who's there for her, not for what she represents, not for politics or money or status." She took a breath. "So no vampire politics, no using her as a pawn, no arranging marriages or alliances or whatever it is that royal vampires do. She gets to be a kid, just a kid." "Understood." For a long moment, Dominic just stared at her. Then, and Elena almost didn't believe it, he smiled. A real smile. Not the cold curve of lips from earlier, but something genuine and bright and absolutely devastating. "Understood," he said softly. "You have my word." They shook on it. His hand was cold in hers, but his grip was firm. Honest. The grip of someone who kept their promises. "Papa, Elena," Lily's voice echoed from upstairs. "Come see my room." Elena found herself smiling despite everything. Despite the impossibility. Despite the absolute insanity of what she'd just agreed to. Dominic gestured toward the staircase. "After you." They climbed together and Elena tried not to think about how her entire life had just changed in the space of an hour. Tried not to wonder what she'd gotten herself into, or whether she'd regret this, or whether vampire kings kept their promises. Lily's room was exactly what a 7-year-old's room should be. Organized chaos. A princess canopy bed with purple curtains, walls painted deep violet with glow-in-the-dark stars, toys and books and art supplies scattered across every surface. But there were also more unusual items. A locked cabinet that Dominic said contained supplements, curtains thick enough to block out all sunlight, and a small refrigerator humming quietly in the corner. Lily grabbed Elena's hand and pulled her toward a massive bookshelf. "These are my favorites. She began pulling down books with the enthusiasm only a 7-year-old could muster. This one's about a girl who finds a wild horse on the moors. This one's about horse racing. This one's about a princess who runs away to become a stable hand. Elena sank down onto the floor, letting Lily pile books into her lap. Dominic leaned against the doorframe, watching them with an expression Elena couldn't quite read. Something warm, something grateful, something that looked dangerously like hope. For the first time in 6 years, Elena felt like she could breathe. The first 3 weeks at the Nightshade estate passed in a blur of adjustments and revelations that rewrote everything Elena thought she knew about the world. She learned that vampires could walk in daylight. They just preferred not to. The sun didn't burn them to ash like the movies suggested, but it made them lethargic, uncomfortable like humans trying to function on 2 hours of sleep. Dominic explained this over breakfast on her third day casual, as discussing the weather while Lily picked at her eggs and toast. "We eat regular food," he'd said, watching Elena's surprise with something that might have been amusement. "But we need blood supplements to thrive, especially during transition." He gestured to the small glass beside Lily's plate, dark red liquid that looked nothing like juice. The child had wrinkled her nose, but dutifully drank half before pushing it away. "It tastes like pennies," Lily had complained. "I know, little one, but it keeps you strong." Elena learned that Lily was in the delicate transitional phase between human-born and full vampire, a process that took years and required careful monitoring. That missing even a few days of supplements could trigger the kind of crisis Elena had witnessed at the Nocturne. That Seraphine had been systematically withholding those supplements for weeks, watching Lily deteriorate, waiting for nature to take its course. The casual cruelty of it still made Elena's blood boil. She learned that Dominic ran a technology empire from his study managing investments and innovations that had shaped the modern world. Server farms and satellite networks and fiber optic cables carrying information at the speed of light. He'd been there at the beginning of the internet, had funded the first commercial email systems, had his fingers in every major tech advancement of the last 40 years. 312 years gives you certain advantages, he'd said when Elena had asked how someone who'd been born in 1743 understood quantum computing. "You learn to adapt or you die." I chose to adapt. He'd been turned during a plague outbreak in colonial Pennsylvania. 23 years old, dying of smallpox, delirious with fever, when an ancient vampire had offered him a choice: death or transformation. He'd chosen transformation and spent the next 3 centuries watching the world change around him. "I've seen empires rise and fall," he'd told her one evening, the two of them alone in the library while Lily slept upstairs. "Watched humans go from candlelight to electric light to light-speed communication. Your species is remarkable, Elena. Fragile, but remarkable." She learned that he'd been alone, truly alone, without a partner since Lily's mother died 2 years ago. Isabel had been human when they met a doctor working in a free clinic in Philadelphia. Dominic had been funding the clinic anonymously for decades. They'd fallen in love slowly, carefully, and she'd chosen transformation to be with him, to raise Lily together. Then cancer had taken her. One of the few diseases that could kill a vampire, aggressive and merciless. Elena had seen the pain flicker across Dominic's face when he spoke of it, quickly masked, but there nonetheless. "She made me promise to give Lily a childhood," he'd said quietly. "Not just vampire training and political maneuvering, actual childhood. Toys and books and dreams about horses." His voice had roughened on the last word. "I thought Seraphine could help with that. I was wrong." Elena learned that the vampire world was watching, that news of the Crimson King's daughter nearly dying had spread through the supernatural community like wildfire, that her role in saving Lily had made her both protected and controversial. "Some of the older vampires think humans shouldn't be involved in transition rituals," Dominic explained one evening over dinner. They'd fallen into an easy routine. Lily, Elena, and Dominic eating together each night, discussing everything from homework to politics to the best way to build a blanket fort. "They see your presence here as inappropriate." "Do you care what they think?" Elena asked, spearing a piece of chicken. Lily looked between them, chewing her pasta thoughtfully. The child had started eating more, started smiling, more started asking questions instead of sitting in silence like she had that first day at the Nocturne. "No," Dominic's answer was immediate. "But you should be aware. Some of them will test you, try to intimidate you, prove you don't belong. If anyone makes you uncomfortable," Elena said carefully, "I'll tell you. Then my reputation will handle the rest." Lily giggled, actually giggled, a sound Elena had never heard from her in those first terrible moments. "Papa's reputation works wonders." "Oh, really?" Elena grinned. "Should I be scared?" "Nah, Lily reached across the table to pat Elena's hand with the casual affection of a child who'd decided you belonged to her. Papa only uses it on bad people. You're good people. The simple faith in those words made Elena's throat tight. She wasn't sure she deserved it. The trust, the affection, the way Lily looked at her like she'd hung the moon. But she was learning to accept it anyway. River's first visit came on a Saturday, 2 weeks after Elena had moved into the estate. She'd been nervous, unsure how her 16-year-old brother would react to vampires and Gothic mansions, and the impossible life she'd stumbled into. She needn't have worried. River stepped out of the car Dominic had sent for him, and Elena barely recognized him. He'd gained weight. Color had returned to his cheeks. The hollow, haunted look that had lived in his eyes for the past year was gone, replaced by something that looked dangerously like hope. "Holy shit," he'd breathed, staring up at the estate. "You work for Batman." Language, Elena had said automatically, but she was smiling, crying and smiling at the same time because her brother looked alive again. Actually alive. "The treatment's working," she'd asked, pulling him into a hug. "Better than anyone expected." River had hugged her back hard. "Dr. Martinez says if it keeps going like this, I'll be in full remission by Christmas." Dominic had appeared on the front steps, Lily beside him. The child had been vibrating with excitement all morning, asking Elena every 5 minutes when River would arrive. "You must be River," Dominic had said, descending the steps with that preternatural grace. "Elena speaks of you often." River had stared, blinked, then grinned. "You're a vampire." "I am." "Cool." Lily had tugged on River's sleeve before he could say more. "Want to see my telescope? We can look at Jupiter's moons. They're really bright tonight." "Hell yeah." River had followed her inside without hesitation, leaving Elena alone with Dominic on the front steps. "He took that well," Dominic had observed. "He's 16, and he's been dying for a year. I think finding out vampires are real ranks pretty low on his list of shocking revelations." They'd stood in comfortable silence, watching the sunset over the estate grounds. Elena had been hyper-aware of Dominic beside her. The way he stood perfectly still in that way humans never managed. The faint scent of cedar that seemed to follow him. The cold that radiated from his skin, even from 2 feet away. "Thank you," she'd said quietly, "for River, for everything. You saved my daughter's life. This doesn't come close to balancing that scale." "It's not a debt." Elena had struggled for words. "It's just thank you for giving him a chance to live. Everyone deserves that chance." Dominic's voice had carried weight history, no matter how impossible it seems. Elena had thought about asking what he meant, what losses he'd witnessed over 3 centuries, what impossible chances he'd been given or denied. But Lily's laughter had echoed from upstairs, followed by River's deeper voice, and the moment had passed. Week 3 brought the first real threat. Elena had been reading to Lily in the library, their favorite spot. The secret garden, which had quickly become a shared obsession. They just reached the part where Mary discovered the hidden key when Elena heard voices in the foyer. Multiple voices, formal, tense. Dominic appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. "Elena, can you take Lily upstairs for a bit?" Something in his tone put Elena on alert. "What's wrong?" "Nothing that concerns you." But his eyes said otherwise. They said danger. They said stay away. They said things Elena didn't want to understand. Lily's fingers tightened on Elena's sleeve. "It's the council, isn't it?" "Yes." Dominic didn't lie to his daughter. Never had, as far as Elena could tell. "They want to meet Elena, but I'm not sure." "Let them meet me." Elena closed the book, careful to mark their place. She'd learned enough about vampire society in 3 weeks to know that the council wasn't something you ignored. They were the governing body of the Eastern Territories, 5 ancient vampires who'd been maintaining order for centuries. If I'm going to be part of Lily's life, they need to see I'm not going anywhere. "Elena," Dominic's voice carried a warning. I'm not scared of vampires, Dominic." She stood smoothing down her jeans. Not exactly formal attire for meeting ancient supernatural beings, but it would have to do. "Well, I'm a little scared, but I'm not running." Something fierce and proud flashed across his face. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but stay close to me. And if I tell you to leave, you leave immediately." "Understood." "Understood." The council consisted of 5 vampires, each older and more intimidating than the last. They were arranged in the formal sitting room like judges at a trial, and Elena felt their eyes on her the moment she entered. Assessing, weighing, finding her wanting. The speaker was a woman who looked about 50, but carried herself with the authority of centuries. Silver hair swept back from a face that might have been beautiful once but had hardened into something more austere. Her eyes were pale blue, almost colorless, and they tracked Elena's every movement. So, she said, her voice carrying the weight of ages, this is the human. This is Elena Cross, Dominic corrected, his voice icy. The woman who saved my daughter's life when no one else would. By violating the sacred laws of transition. Another council member spoke, male, stern, with eyes like chips of ice. He looked younger than the woman, maybe 40 in human years, but the age in his gaze suggested otherwise. Blood must be given by family or sworn guardians, not random humans who happened to be nearby. She wasn't random. Lily's voice rang out clear and strong. Elena turned to find the child standing in the doorway, her chin lifted defiantly. She'd told Lily to stay upstairs. Should have known the child wouldn't listen. Lily, Dominic's voice held a warning. Go upstairs. No. The single word carried more authority than any 7-year-old should possess. Lily walked into the room, moving to stand between Elena and the council. Her small frame seemed to take up more space than it should, like she was drawing on something deeper than physical presence. You want to judge, Elena, fine, but you do it with me here. She looked up at the council, and Elena saw her eyes flash violet. Because she's mine, my guardian, my friend. And if you make her leave, You'll what? The woman's voice was sharp as broken glass. You're a child, Lily. You don't make demands of this council. I'm the heir to the Crimson Throne. Lily's voice didn't waver, didn't shake. She stood there in her purple pajamas and bare feet, staring down 5 ancient vampires without flinching. And when I'm grown, I'll remember who respected my choices and who tried to take them away. The room went absolutely silent. Elena's heart pounded against her ribs. She wanted to grab Lily, pull her back, shield her from these ancient beings who could probably end them both with a thought. But she saw the way Dominic's hand rested on his daughter's shoulder. Protective but not restraining. Proud. The child has courage, the woman said finally. I'll give her that. The child, Elena spoke before she could stop herself, has a name, and she's standing right here. So if you want to discuss her future, maybe you should include her in the conversation. 5 pairs of immortal eyes turned to Elena. She felt Dominic's tension like a physical force beside her. Could practically hear him screaming at her telepathically to shut up, to back down, to let him handle this. But she couldn't, wouldn't, because Lily deserved better than to be talked about like she wasn't in the room. Brave, one of the other vampires murmured, an older man with a weathered face and kind eyes. Or foolish, I haven't decided which. More often than I'd like to admit, Elena said. The woman stood, moving with inhuman grace, to stand directly in front of Elena. She was tall, easily 6 feet, and Elena had to crane her neck to maintain eye contact. Do you know what you've done, human? The question wasn't rhetorical. Elena could hear the genuine curiosity beneath the stern exterior. I saved a child who was dying. You've bound yourself to the Crimson Line. The woman's eyes searched Elena's face. Your blood recognized Lily's need and answered it. That's not something that can be undone. Not something that should be taken lightly. I don't want to undo it. Even knowing it means you'll be part of this world forever. That you'll be watched, judged, possibly targeted by those who disagree with your presence. Elena thought about her tiny apartment, now just a memory. River's medical bills erased. The way Catherine had treated her like dirt on her shoe. She thought about the alternative, Lily's cold hand in hers. Dominic's grateful smiles. River's returning health belonging to something bigger than survival. Yes, she said clearly. Even knowing that. The woman studied her for what felt like an eternity. Then slowly she nodded. Then we have no objection. The words fell like stones into still water, rippling outward. The bond is legitimate, formed in crisis with true intent. This council recognizes Elena Cross as sworn companion to the heir of the Crimson Throne. Relief flooded through Elena so strongly her knees almost buckled. Dominic's hand found her shoulder, steadying her, and she leaned into the contact without thinking. However, the male council member who'd spoken earlier stepped forward. There are conditions. Of course there were. Elena forced herself to stand straight to meet his gaze. Elena Cross must be educated in our ways. She must learn our history, our laws, our etiquette. She represents the Crimson Line now, and we will not have our reputation tarnished by ignorance. When done, Dominic said immediately, I'll arrange for tutors. And she must prove herself. The woman's eyes gleamed with something Elena couldn't quite identify. Challenge, maybe, or curiosity. The winter gathering is in 10 weeks. The heir is expected to attend, and traditionally she would be presented alongside her guardian. Elena Cross will attend as well. Let the vampire world see her and judge for themselves whether she deserves the position she's claimed. 10 weeks. Elena had 10 weeks to learn everything about vampire society before being thrown to the proverbial wolves. "I'll be ready," she said with more confidence than she felt. The council departed shortly after leaving behind a thick silence. Lily immediately launched herself at Elena, wrapping her arms around her waist. "You were so brave," the child whispered. "Thank you for not leaving." Elena hugged her back, resting her cheek on top of Lily's head. "I told you I wouldn't." "I know, but—" Lily pulled back, looking up at Elena with those impossibly old eyes in a child's face. "You keep your promises. That's rare." The quiet heartbreak in that statement made Elena want to fight everyone who'd ever let this little girl down. "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. Not unless you want me to." "Never." Lily hugged her tighter. "I want you forever." Forever, such a simple word for such an impossible promise. But looking at Lily's face at Dominic, watching them from across the room, with an expression that made her chest tight, Elena thought maybe forever wasn't as impossible as it sounded. The next 7 weeks passed in a whirlwind of education that made Elena's head spin. She learned about vampire houses and bloodlines, about the intricate web of alliances and feuds that stretched back centuries. Learned that the Corvus family had been rivals with the Nightshade line since before the American Revolution, something about a disputed territory claim in the Appalachian Mountains. Learned that Lady Moira Corvus, head of the Western Territories, was Dominic's oldest and most complicated adversary. "She'll test you," Lady Seraphina Vale warned during one of their etiquette lessons. The council member had agreed to serve as Elena's primary tutor, and she was thorough to the point of being merciless. "Moira respects strength above all else. Show weakness, and she'll tear you apart." Metaphorically, of course. "Of course," Elena had echoed weakly. She learned formal greetings and proper forms of address, learned which topics were safe conversation and which would start century-old feuds, learned how to politely refuse a blood offering without giving offense, how to accept a challenge without triggering a blood duel, how to navigate the complex social hierarchy of immortal beings who'd been playing political games since before she was born. But Dominic also insisted on combat training. Marcus Flynn arrived on Elena's 4th week. He was a vampire who looked about 40, with short gray hair and the build of someone who'd spent decades in military service, which it turned out he had, 150 years as a soldier before being turned during the Civil War. "I'm not letting you walk into the winter gathering unprepared," Dominic had said the first morning, watching Elena ice her bruised knuckles after training. "The older vampires will respect strength. Show weakness and they'll destroy you." "Metaphorically or for real?" Elena had asked. "Both." Marcus taught her to fight like her life depended on it, because it might. Pressure points and escape holds, where vampires were vulnerable and how to exploit those weaknesses. Silver worked, but not the way movies suggested. It didn't burn on contact, but it interfered with vampire healing, made wounds that should close in minutes take hours. "You'll never match a vampire for strength or speed," Marcus had told her, demonstrating a hold that had Elena flat on her back in seconds. "But you can be smarter, faster thinker, use their arrogance against them." One session in week 6, Marcus went full strength. No holding back, no pulling punches. He threw Elena across the training room hard enough that she felt her ribs crack on impact. Dominic, watching from the doorway, had tensed, taken a step forward like he was going to intervene. Elena had waved him off, stood despite the pain screaming through her torso. Met Marcus's eyes. Again. By the end of that session, she'd landed 3 successful counters against full vampire speed. Marcus had grinned, actually grinned, showing teeth that were slightly too sharp. "You'll do, Cross, you'll do." But between the combat training and political lessons, there were also softer moments. Bedtime stories with Lily, the child curled against Elena's side while she read from The Secret Garden or Chronicles of Narnia, or whatever book had caught Lily's fancy that week. Movie nights in the library, the 3 of them piled on the oversized couch with popcorn and hot chocolate. Lazy Sunday mornings when Elena taught Lily to bake cookies while Dominic lurked in the doorway pretending he wasn't watching them with naked affection on his face. River's visits became a weekly ritual. Every Saturday without fail, Dominic's car would pick him up and bring him to the estate. The change in her brother was miraculous. He'd gained 20 pounds. His hair, which had been falling out in clumps from the chemotherapy, was growing back thick and dark. The doctors were calling it a medical miracle. Elena knew better. Whatever treatment Dominic had arranged, whatever supernatural medicine or vampire expertise he'd brought to bear, it was working. "Your vampire friend spoils me," River had said during his 3rd visit, sprawled on the library floor with Lily, the 2 of them building an elaborate blanket fort. Elena had nearly dropped the coffee pot she'd been holding. We're not, right. UP River hadn't even looked up from the fort construction. And he doesn't watch you like you're the sun rising after an endless night, or find excuses to be in whatever room you're in, or smile more in 8 weeks than he probably has in 8 years. Elena had fled to her room that night, cheeks burning, and realized with the start that River was right. She was falling for Dominic Nightshade, not because he was powerful or rich, though he was both. Not because he'd saved River's life or given her a dorm or provided a home, but because he was gentle with Lily, patient with River, grateful without being condescending. Because he looked at her like she was a miracle instead of a burden. Because when he smiled, really smiled, not the king mask he wore for the rest of the world, her heart stopped. "This is a terrible idea," she whispered to her empty room. But she couldn't stop smiling. Week 8 brought a revelation that changed everything. Marcus's investigation into the poisoning attempt had continued quietly in the background. On a Tuesday morning, he requested a private meeting with Dominic and Elena. "We found something," Marcus said, spreading documents across Dominic's desk. "The poisoning wasn't opportunistic. It was coordinated." "Seraphine," Dominic said flatly. "Not just Seraphine." Marcus tapped one of the documents. "These are encrypted communications we intercepted. Cassius Blackthorne, Seraphine's half-brother, head of the Blackthorne clan in Chicago, has been planning this for years." Elena leaned forward, scanning the pages. Bank transfers, meeting schedules, lists of names she didn't recognize. "He's not just trying to kill Lily," Marcus continued. "He's trying to destabilize the entire Eastern Territory, replace you with someone he can control." "His nephew, Julian," Dominic said quietly. "Seraphine's son." "Exactly." Marcus pulled out another document. "And there's more. We believe Cassius has an informant inside this estate, someone on your inner circle feeding him information." The room went cold. "Who?" Elena asked. "We don't know yet, but whoever it is has access to Lily's schedule, her medical needs, security protocols. Everything." Dominic's jaw tightened. "Then we assume everyone is compromised until proven otherwise." Elena felt something heavy settle in her chest. The staff she'd come to know over the past 8 weeks. The tutors. Even Marcus himself, though that seemed impossible. Trust once lost was hard to rebuild. Week 9 brought violence. Elena had been walking in the estate gardens with Lily, a routine they'd established. The child loved being outside, especially in the evening when the sun was low and the air was cool. She'd been picking roses for a dining table arrangement, moving between the bushes with the unself-conscious grace of childhood. Elena had been 10 feet away, watching the perimeter like Marcus had taught her. Alert but relaxed. It was a beautiful evening. Perfect. Peaceful. The attack came from nowhere. One moment, Elena was watching Lily smell a particularly fragrant white rose. The next, a sound like thunder cracking, and Lily was screaming. Elena's training kicked in before conscious thought. She moved, placing herself between Lily and the source of the sound. Felt something hot slice past her shoulder, close enough to burn. Saw the rosebush behind where she'd been standing explode in a shower of splinters. Sniper. Someone had shot at them. "Run!" Elena grabbed Lily, already moving toward the house. The child was faster than a human 7-year-old should be, but still a child. Still vulnerable. Another shot. This one hit Elena's shoulder, not a direct hit, but close enough. Pain exploded white-hot down her arm. She stumbled, kept moving her body a shield between Lily and whoever was trying to kill them. They made it to the garden door. Elena slammed it shut behind them, threw the bolt, and collapsed against the wood. Her shoulder was bleeding, not badly, but enough to make her lightheaded. Or maybe that was shock. "Elena." Lily's hands were on her face, her shoulder checking for damage with the clinical efficiency of someone who'd seen injuries before. "You're hurt. You're bleeding." "I'm okay." Elena's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Are you hurt? Did they?" "No, you blocked me. You took the bullet." Footsteps. Running footsteps, too fast to be human. Dominic appeared around the corner, and Elena had never seen him look like this. His eyes were full red, no amber, no gold. Just red like embers, like rage given form. "Who?" His voice was barely human. A growl, a promise of violence. "Sniper. Garden. Didn't see them." Dominic was gone before Elena could say more. She heard him move through the house, heard the garden door splinter, heard something that might have been hunting and might have been murder. "Elena." Lily's voice was small, scared. "You saved me again." "That's the job, sweetheart." But Elena was thinking about what Dominic had said weeks ago. Some vampires would test her, try to prove she didn't belong. Apparently, some of them had decided to make their point with bullets. Dominic returned 20 minutes later carrying a body. Not dead, but unconscious. A vampire who looked about 30, dressed in black tactical gear, a high-powered rifle slung across his back. Hired gun, Dominic said, his voice still carrying that inhuman edge. Cassius Blackthorne sent him. Cassius, Seraphine's half-brother. Elena had learned about him during her political lessons. Head of the Blackthorne clan in Chicago. Ambitious, ruthless, someone who saw Lily's survival as an obstacle to his own power. He won't stop, Elena said quietly. Lily was pressed against her uninjured side, shaking. This was just the first attempt. I know. Dominic knelt beside them, his hands gentle, despite the rage still simmering in his eyes. He examined Elena's shoulder with practiced efficiency, his touch cold against her fevered skin. The bullet grazed you. It'll heal clean. His eyes met hers. You protected her. You didn't hesitate. I told you, Elena said. I won't let anyone hurt her. Something shifted in Dominic's expression. The red faded from his eyes, replaced by amber gold and something softer. Something that looked dangerously like the way Elena felt when she looked at him. I know, he said quietly. I'm beginning to understand that. He stayed with her that night, sat vigil while the estate doctor treated her wound, while Lily finally fell asleep, curled against Elena's uninjured side. Stayed while Elena drifted in and out of feverish sleep, her body fighting shock and blood loss. She woke once in the deep hours of the morning to find him still there, sitting in a chair beside her bed, reading a book by lamplight, but his attention clearly on her, not the pages. You're still here, she murmured. Where else would I be? Elena's head was fuzzy from pain medication and exhaustion, fuzzy enough that she said things she wouldn't have said otherwise. Did you ever think about giving up when Isabel died, when Seraphine betrayed you? Dominic closed his book, set it aside, was quiet for so long, Elena thought he wouldn't answer. Every day, he said finally. For months after Isabel died, I thought about walking into the sunrise, letting it end. He looked at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes stole her breath. Lily was the only thing that stopped me. She needed me. So I stayed. Elena's throat tightened. I'm glad you did. So am I. His eyes held hers, especially now. The air between them shifted, charged. Elena was very aware suddenly of how close he was sitting, of the way his eyes tracked over her face like he was memorizing every detail, of how easy it would be to reach out to close the distance to Elena. His voice was rough. There are 1,000 reasons why this is a bad idea. I know. You work for me. There's a power imbalance. You're here for Lily. I know. But I haven't stopped thinking about you since the moment you whispered stay to my daughter. Dominic leaned forward, and Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Since you stood on that floor covered in broken glass and chose to save a dying child rather than save yourself, you're brilliant and brave and utterly impossible. He paused, and Elena saw him gathering courage. And I think I'm falling in love with you. The world narrowed to just the two of them. The quiet room, the lamplight, the impossible confession hanging between them. I can't, Elena whispered, and watched pain flash across his face. Not while I work for you, not while there's a power imbalance. It's not fair to either of us. Dominic nodded slowly, drew back, but his eyes never left hers. Then I'll wait, he said quietly. However long it takes, because you're worth waiting for, Elena Cross. He stood, moved toward the door. Get some rest. We have 7 more weeks of training before the winter gathering. And after today, I think we can assume Cassius won't be the last threat we face. He paused in the doorway. But I meant what I said. I'll wait. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll still be here. Elena lay in the dark long after he left her shoulder, throbbing, her heart racing, and realized she'd already made her choice. She just needed to figure out how to make it work. The remaining weeks blurred together in a haze of preparation and growing tension. Week 10 brought another attack, this one more sophisticated. 4 vampires materialized from the shadows during an evening walk, moving with coordinated precision. Their target, Lily. Elena fought like Marcus had taught her. Used their arrogance against them, their certainty that a human couldn't possibly be a threat. She had silver blades now, gifts from Dominic, and she knew how to use them. She took down one attacker before the others overwhelmed her. But by then, Dominic had arrived with Marcus and 3 other guards. The fight was over in seconds. Cassius's nephew Julian was among the attackers. A half-vampire boy of 19 who looked at Lily with naked hatred. She's weak, he'd spat when Dominic had him pinned. She'll never be strong enough to rule. The Crimson Throne deserves better. Dominic had broken both his legs, left him alive but barely. Tell your uncle, he'd said, his voice arctic, that the next attack will be met with permanent consequences. But Elena knew it wouldn't stop. Cassius wanted Lily dead and Julian on the throne. One failed kidnapping wouldn't change that. The violence brought Elena and Dominic closer, forced them into a partnership born of necessity. They spent hours in the war room planning security improvements, identifying threats, preparing for the winter gathering, where all their enemies would be gathered in one place. Elena suggested routing deliveries through a secure facility in Montana, reducing the chance of poison supplements reaching Lily. The change saved Dominic's operation $4 million in security costs and earned her a smile that made her knees weak. "You're brilliant," he'd said simply, and the way he looked at her suggested he wasn't just talking about logistics. River's fourth visit brought clarity. "You need to quit," he said bluntly. He and Lily were stargazing on the terrace while Elena and Dominic prepared dinner in the kitchen. "Your job, I mean. The employee thing." Elena had nearly cut her finger off with the knife she'd been using. "What? You can't be in love with your boss." River had looked at her with eyes too knowing for 16. "So you need to not be his employee anymore." Problem solved. Later, after River had gone home and Lily was asleep, Elena had found Dominic in his study. "I quit," she'd said without preamble. He'd looked up from the papers he'd been reviewing, surprise flickering across his face. "What? I quit as your employee. I can't be in love with my boss, so I'm not your employee anymore." She'd crossed the room, hard hammering. "I'll still be here for Lily. That doesn't change. But I'm here as her guardian, not your employee. Equal footing. No power imbalance." Dominic had stood slowly. "Elena, I'm in love with you." The words tumbled out in a rush. "Have been for weeks. Maybe since that first night. And I know there are 1,000 reasons this is complicated, but River dying for a year taught me that life's too short to waste on fear." She'd paused. "Or in your case, life's too long to spend it alone." Dominic had crossed the distance between them in 2 strides. One hand slid into her hair, the other wrapped around her waist, and then he was kissing her like she was oxygen, and he'd been drowning. The kiss was cold fire, strange and perfect. Elena's heart raced while Dominic's remained perfectly still. No heartbeat, no warmth, but somehow more alive than anyone she'd ever known. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, well, Elena was breathing hard. Dominic was doing it out of habit more than necessity. She grinned. "So, partners." "Partners," Dominic agreed, his smile devastating. "In everything." The winter gathering loomed 2 weeks away, and Elena knew their trials were just beginning. But standing there in Dominic's arms, Lily safe upstairs, River healthy and thriving, she thought maybe, just maybe they could face anything together. The dress arrived 3 days before the winter gathering. Elena stood in front of the full-length mirror in her bedroom, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. The gown was crimson silk that flowed like water, catching the light with every movement. The neckline was elegant without being revealing, cut to emphasize strength rather than fragility. Helena Thorne, the vampire designer Dominic had commissioned, had somehow captured exactly who Elena was: a warrior in silk, a survivor wrapped in beauty. "You look like a queen," Lily whispered from the doorway. Elena turned to find the child watching her with wide eyes. Lily wore black velvet embroidered with silver thread, her dark hair swept back with ribbons that matched Elena's dress. She looked like a princess from a Gothic fairy tale. "We match," Lily said, delighted. "Like a real guardian and heir." "They are a real guardian and heir," Elena reminded her, kneeling to adjust one of Lily's ribbons. The gesture was automatic, now maternal. Somewhere in the past 10 weeks, this child had become hers in every way that mattered. "I know." Lily's smile was bright, genuine. "But now we look like it too." A knock at the door. Dominic entered, and Elena's breath caught. He wore formal attire, all black with crimson accents that matched her dress perfectly. His hair was swept back every inch the Crimson King, and the sight of him made her heart stutter. His eyes found hers in the mirror, and the heat in that gaze could have melted steel. "Beautiful," he murmured, and Elena knew he wasn't just talking about the dress. "We clean up okay," she managed, trying for levity, despite the butterflies in her stomach. Tomorrow they'd face 300 vampires at the winter gathering. Tomorrow Cassius would make his move, would try to prove Elena unworthy, would attempt to discredit Lily's claim to the throne. Tomorrow, everything they'd built over the past 10 weeks would be tested. Tonight they had this moment, this quiet evening before the storm. "Come here," Dominic said softly. Elena crossed to him and he pulled her into his arms, careful of the dress. His forehead rested against hers, and they stood like that for a long moment, breathing each other in. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said quietly, "we face it together." Together, Elena agreed. Lily wrapped her arms around both their waists, inserting herself into the embrace with the easy confidence of a child who knew she was loved. All three of us, she declared. Family. Family, Dominic and Elena echoed simultaneously. And for a moment, everything was perfect. The gathering was held at an estate outside the city that predated the American Revolution. The mansion rose from manicured grounds like something from another era, all stone and Gothic spires and windows that glowed like eyes in the gathering dusk. Dozens of cars were already there when they arrived. Hundreds of vampires, ancient beings who'd witnessed empires rise and fall, all gathered to observe the Crimson King's household and judge the human who'd dared to insert herself into their world. Elena's hands were shaking. She clasped them together in her lap, willing them to be still. Breathe, Dominic murmured from beside her. His hand found hers, cold but steady. Remember your training. Head high, show no fear. Easy for you to say, Elena muttered, but she straightened her spine anyway. Lily squeezed her other hand. You've got this, Elena. You're the bravest person I know. The car stopped. The driver opened the door, and there was nothing left to do but step into the lion's den. They were announced at the ballroom entrance. Dominic Nightshade Crimson, King of the Eastern Territories. Lily Morgana Nightshade, heir to the Crimson Throne. Elena Ravenna Cross, sworn companion to the heir. The ballroom fell silent as they entered. 300 pairs of eyes turned to stare, and Elena felt the weight of their judgment like a physical thing. Curiosity, disdain, interest, anger. All of it focused on her with laser intensity. She kept her chin up, expression neutral. Everything Lady Seraphina had drilled into her for 10 weeks. She was representing the Crimson Line now. One moment of weakness, one flash of fear, and they'd tear her apart. Lily stayed glued to her side, the child's hand warm in hers despite the vampire cold that ran through her veins. Dominic walked half a step ahead, clearing the path, his presence alone enough to make the crowd part. The first hour was a blur of introductions. Vampire lords and ladies who spoke in riddles and half-truths, who tested Elena with backhanded compliments and loaded questions. She navigated it as well as she could, relying on training and instinct. A vampire duchess asked about her family lineage. Elena responded truthfully, daughter of a construction worker and a woman who'd abandoned her children, no prestigious bloodline, no inherited wealth. The duchess's smile turned sharp, but Elena met her gaze steadily. I don't need generations of nobility to know right from wrong, Elena said quietly. I just need to see a child in danger and choose to help. The duchess had laughed, surprised. Well said, human. Well said. Lily handled herself with impressive grace, a tiny princess accepting homage from beings 10 times her age. She'd been trained for this her entire life, and it showed. When an older vampire condescended to her, she responded with icy politeness that made Dominic smile. But then disaster struck. At precisely midnight, the traditional time for formal announcements, the ballroom doors burst open. Cassius Blackthorne entered, flanked by 12 vampire guards. He was tall, easily 6'2", with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. Elena recognized him from the intelligence Marcus had gathered. Seraphine's half-brother, head of the Blackthorne clan. The man who'd sent assassins after Lily, who wanted his nephew Julian on the Crimson Throne. I challenge this proceeding. His voice carried across the ballroom, silencing all conversation. Dominic tensed beside Elena. Cassius, you weren't invited. I invoke the right of challenge under old law. Cassius strode forward, his guards fanning out behind him. Elena Cross's bond with Lily Nightshade is illegitimate. The room erupted in murmurs. Vampires shifted, some moving closer to watch others retreating to safety. Elena felt Lily's hand tighten in hers. Explain yourself. Lady Moira Corvus's voice cut through the noise. The head of the Western Territories stood from where she'd been observing near the dais. She was ancient, powerful, and until this moment, a complete unknown. Dominic's oldest rival, the vampire who could make or break Elena's standing. Cassius turned to address the assembled crowd, ignoring Dominic entirely. This human forced herself on a dying child, gave blood without understanding the sacred ritual, manipulated the Crimson King in a moment of vulnerability. He gestured dramatically. She seeks power, wealth, influence through a child she has no right to claim. I have evidence. 3 vampires stepped forward, faces Elena didn't recognize. Cassius's witnesses clearly compelled or paid to lie. We were present at the Nocturne restaurant, the first said, his voice flat. We witnessed Miss Cross deliberately cause Lily Nightshade's collapse. She coerced the child into accepting her blood, the second added. She's a con artist, the third finished, who saw an opportunity and seized it. The murmurs grew louder. Some vampires were nodding, already convinced. Others looked skeptical but uncertain. Lily's voice rang out clear and furious. That's not true. The child is too young to understand she's been manipulated, Cassius said smoothly. Lady Seraphina Vale stepped forward from her position with the Council of Five. Under old law, the accused may defend themselves. Elena Cross, how do you answer these charges? Dominic started to speak, but Elena touched his arm. I've got this. She walked to the center of the ballroom alone. 300 ancient vampires staring at her. Cassius looking smug, certain of victory. Lily watching with desperate hope. Elena took a breath and began. Cassius is right about one thing, she said, her voice carrying in the sudden silence. I am just a human. 3 months ago I had nothing, was nobody. She looked around the room, meeting eyes refusing to flinch. So when a child has started dying in front of me, I had two choices, walk away or try to help even though I had no idea what I was doing. Her eyes found Cassius. I chose to help because that's what you do when a child is dying. Not because I knew about vampire rituals or bonds or politics, because she was 7 years old and turning blue. She turned to address the crowd directly. But let's talk about manipulation. Let's talk about why Cassius is really here. She gestured to Dominic, who produced a tablet and began displaying documents on the room's projection screens. His sister Seraphine was supposed to care for Lily. Instead, she withheld medical supplements for weeks, stood by and watched a 7-year-old have seizures, hoped she would die so Seraphine's son Julian could inherit. Financial records appeared on the screens, bank transfers, encrypted messages, all the evidence Marcus's spies had gathered over the past 10 weeks. And when that failed, what happened? Cassius sent spies to poison Lily's blood supplements, sent his nephew Julian to kidnap her from her own home. The 3 witnesses Cassius had brought were led forward by guards. Under the council's compulsion, they couldn't lie. I was paid $50,000 to testify falsely, the first admitted. Cassius Blackthorne told me exactly what to say, the second confirmed. None of us were at the nocturne. We've never met Elena Cross before tonight, the third finished. The crowd erupted. Vampires surged forward, angry, shocked. Cassius's face went from confident to white to red in the span of seconds. This is fabrication, he shouted. These witnesses are coerced. They speak under the council's compulsion, Lady Seraphina said coldly. They cannot lie. She turned to Cassius and her eyes were merciless. You attempted to murder the Crimson Heir. You sent assassins into the Eastern Territories. Under old law, the penalty for attempted regicide is death. But before judgment could be passed, the ballroom's far doors opened again. The voice came from the entrance. Wait, I have evidence. Every head turned. A woman stood in the doorway, and it took Elena a moment to recognize her. Seraphine Blackthorne. She looked nothing like the polished socialite from the nocturne. Her hair was disheveled, her clothes simple, but her eyes were clear, determined. I'm here to testify against my brother, she said. The room went absolutely silent. Seraphine walked forward, producing a flash drive. I have records, emails, recorded calls, 12 years of planning, everything you need to prove Cassius hasn't just targeted Lily. He's been systematically eliminating young heirs across North America for over a decade. She looked at Lily and tears streaked down her face. I was complicit. I let him use me, use my son, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Lily stared at her former stepmother, confusion and hurt warring on her young face. Why, the child asked, why help us now? Because 3 weeks ago I received a package. Seraphine's voice broke. Photos of Lily as a baby, with her mother. With me when I still loved being part of this family. And a note that said, I can't undo what I've done, but I can stop him from doing it to others. She looked at Elena. You sent them, didn't you? Elena felt every eye in the room turn to her. She hadn't sent anything, but she understood what Seraphine needed in this moment. Redemption, a path back. Yes, Elena lied smoothly. I thought you deserved to remember what you were fighting for. Seraphine's tears fell faster. She handed the flash drive to Lady Seraphina. 12 other young heirs targeted, 5 already dead. Total systemic control of the vampire economy within 50 years. It's all there. Before anyone could respond, the ballroom's main doors opened one final time. An ancient vampire entered, and the entire room dropped to one knee. Even Dominic. Even Lady Moira. Elena, unsure what else to do, knelt beside Lily. Rise, the ancient vampire said. His voice was like mountains moving like time itself given speech. Everyone stood. "I am Elder Thaddeus of the Grand Alliance," he announced. "We've been monitoring the Blackthorn conspiracy for 5 years. Elena Cross's evidence, combined with Seraphine Blackthorn's testimony, provides everything we need for formal charges." He turned to Cassius, who looked like he wanted to run, but was frozen in place by pure terror. "The trial begins now." What followed took 20 minutes but felt like hours. Elder Thaddeus read the charges: systematically attempted regicide murder of 5 young heirs across 2 decades, conspiracy to commit 12 more murders, economic manipulation worth $18 billion, monopoly violations, treason against vampire governance. Evidence was presented with clinical precision. Financial documents displayed on screens showing the flow of money from Blackthorn accounts to assassins, to corrupt officials, to witnesses who would testify falsely. Testimony from families of the 5 dead heirs, their grief palpable even after years. Medical examiner reports showing identical poison patterns across all 5 deaths. Seraphine's recorded communications proving Cassius had been planning this since before Lily was born. Cassius's lawyer tried to argue it was aggressive business competition. Elder Thaddeus shut him down with a single look. Murdering children is not business competition. Cassius tried to flee. Lady Moira's guards blocked the exits with inhuman speed. Julian, watching from the crowd, tried to attack Elena. Dominic intercepted him before he'd taken 2 steps, twisting the boy's arm behind his back, hard enough that Elena heard something crack. "You'll pay for this," Julian hissed at Elena. "No," Dominic said quietly. "You'll pay for trying to murder my daughter." Finally, the verdict. "Cassius Blackthorn, you are found guilty on all charges." Elder Thaddeus's voice echoed through the ballroom like judgment itself. "Sentence: permanent exile from all vampire territories in North America. All assets seized, $18 billion, to be redistributed to victim families and used to establish a protection fund for young heirs. Public stripping of all titles and honors. Blood supplement operations dissolved, transferred to independent cooperative. You have until sunrise to leave this continent. If you are found within our borders after that, the sentence is death." He turned to Julian Ashmore, found guilty of attempted kidnapping assault with intent to harm the Crimson Heir. Sentenced 50 years indentured service to the Eastern Territories orphanages. You wanted to destroy the vulnerable. You will spend half a century caring for them. Cassius screamed, "This is persecution. You can't." "No," Elder Thaddeus said quietly. "This is justice. Long overdue." Guards dragged Cassius and Julian away. The crowd stood in shocked silence for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Lady Moira Corvus stepped forward, applauding slowly. Others joined her. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was erupting in applause. For Elena. Lady Moira approached and Elena braced herself. This was Dominic's oldest rival, the vampire who could destroy everything with a single word. "The human has teeth," Moira said, her eyes gleaming with something that might have been respect. "Color me impressed." She extended her hand. "You have the Western Territories' support, Miss Cross. Anyone who can expose corruption like that deserves a place in our world." Elena shook her hand, barely believing what was happening. Dominic appeared at her elbow, his hand warm and steady at the small of her back. "That was either very brave or very stupid." "Story of my life," Elena said. He smiled, that genuine, devastating smile she'd come to love. "Dance with me." He guided her onto the dance floor, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers. Around them, vampires were returning to conversations, the drama apparently concluded. But Elena only saw Dominic. "You were brilliant," he murmured as they began to waltz. "Terrifying and brilliant. I think we just made powerful allies." "You did more than that." His thumb traced small circles on her waist. "You showed everyone that you're not someone to be dismissed." The music swelled around them. Elena tried to focus on the steps, but it was hard when Dominic was this close, when his eyes held hers like she was the only person in the room. "Dominic." "I know." His voice dropped lower. "This changes things. You're established now. Recognized." He paused. "So I'm asking again." "Partners." "Partners," she confirmed. "In everything." When the dance ended, Lily raced over, eyes shining. "Elena, Papa, everyone's talking about you. Lady Moira told 3 different people that you're refreshingly impertinent, which I think means she likes you." Elena laughed, scooping Lily up despite her formal dress. "Should we count that as a win?" "Definitely a win." Lily wrapped her arms around Elena's neck. "You were amazing, like a superhero but without the cape." "I could get you a cape," Dominic offered deadpan. "Don't you dare." They left the gathering an hour later, the 3 of them together. A family in everything but name. 4 months passed in a blur of happiness Elena had never imagined possible. The vampire world had shifted in subtle but profound ways. Other houses began hiring human companions for their young heirs, following the precedent Elena had set. The protection fund established from Cassius's seized assets had already prevented 3 assassination attempts on young vampires across the continent. Seraphine, granted clemency for her testimony, had quietly retreated to a small estate in Montana, sending monthly letters to Lily that the child read, but rarely answered. River was thriving. In full remission, his doctors called it a medical miracle. He'd been accepted to Harvard for pre-med, determined to find cures for diseases like the one that had nearly killed him. Dominic had offered to fund his education. River had accepted with a maturity that made Elena's chest ache with pride. Lily's transition was stabilizing. Her powers growing under Elena's gentle guidance, her confidence blooming like the roses in the estate gardens. She called Elena Mom now casually, like it had always been that way. And Elena and Dominic, they were courting. That's what Dominic called it, with a formality that made Elena smile. Weekly dinners with other vampire houses where Elena learned governance and politics. Stolen moments in the library. Long conversations that stretched into dawn, building something real and lasting. It was Dominic who proposed. They were on the terrace one evening watching stars appear in the darkening sky. Lily was asleep upstairs, worn out from a day of training. River had gone home after another weekend visit. Just the two of them and the quiet. "I've been thinking," Dominic said carefully, "about the future." Elena's heart stuttered. "What about it?" "In vampire society, there's a bonding ceremony. It's not quite marriage, but more. A formal declaration that two people are bound to each other. That they choose each other every day for as long as both exist." He turned to face her fully. "I'm asking if you'd consider it. When you're ready. I know it's only been a few months. I know you have your whole life ahead of you. But I want you to know that I'm in this completely. For however long you'll have me." Elena sat up, her pulse racing. "How long does the bonding last?" "Forever, or as close to forever as makes no difference. The ceremony includes an exchange of blood that would extend your life. You wouldn't become vampire, you'd still be human. But you'd age much more slowly, live for centuries instead of decades." Centuries. With him, with Lily, with this family she'd found. "And if I said yes," Elena asked, "what would that mean?" "It would mean you're mine and I'm yours. That the vampire world recognizes our bond as sacred and unbreakable. That anyone who threatens you threatens the crimson line itself." He took her hand, pressed it over his still heart. "It would mean I spend the rest of my very long life trying to make you happy." Elena pretended to think about it. Pretended she hadn't already decided the moment he asked. "Well, when you put it like that, yes. Yes. Yes, you impossible vampire. Yes, I'll bond with you. I'll spend centuries annoying you and loving you and being part of your life." Dominic's smile was incandescent. He kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise, and Elena thought that maybe impossible things really could come true. The bonding ceremony took place 4 months later in late spring when the estate gardens were in full bloom. They kept it small, 50 guests, all close family and friends. The council of 5 attended, supportive now. Lady Moira sent her congratulations in a gift worth more than Elena's old apartment had been. Even Catherine Sterling came bringing a generous present and a heartfelt apology. "I want you to know," Catherine had said quietly to Elena before the ceremony, "that I don't remember everything from that night at the Nocturne. But I know I was cruel. And I know you saved a child's life despite that cruelty. I've been making annual donations to children's hospitals in your name. It's not enough, but it's something." Elena had hugged her, surprising them both. "It's more than enough. Thank you." River stood beside Elena as her attendant, looking sharp in a suit Dominic had commissioned. Lily was the flower girl, taking her duties so seriously that Elena had to hide her smile. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Ancient words in a language Elena didn't speak but somehow understood. Promises exchanged under the open sky. Blood shared, just a few drops, ceremonial and sacred. When Dominic slid the bonding ring onto her finger, black metal inlaid with crimson stones, Elena felt something shift inside her. A connection, a completion, like two puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you," Dominic responded. "My Elena, my heart, my home." They kissed to applause and cheers, but the ceremony wasn't quite over. Elder Thaddeus stepped forward and the crowd quieted. "There is one more tradition," he said, "for those who bond with vampire royalty." He gestured for Elena and Dominic to kneel before him. They did, and Lily came to stand between them, placing one small hand on each of their shoulders. Elena Ravenna Cross, you have proven yourself worthy not just as companion to the heir, but as partner to the king. The Grand Alliance recognizes your bond and grants you the title and authority of Queen Consort of the Eastern Territories. He placed a hand on Elena's head and she felt warmth spread through her, not the cold of vampire magic, but something older, something that connected her to every vampire in the territory, a web of awareness that made her gasp. Rise, your majesty. Elena stood on shaking legs. Dominic took her hand, and together they turned to face the assembled guests. Your king and queen, Elder Thaddeus announced. The crowd erupted in cheers. Lily threw her arms around both of them. You're a queen. My mom is a queen. The reception was joyful. Music and laughter and dancing. Lily refused to leave Elena's side, clinging to her new mother with the desperation of a child who'd been abandoned before and still feared it might happen again. You're stuck with us forever now, Lily said solemnly. Good thing forever is my favorite amount of time, Elena replied. River cut in asking Elena to dance. As they swayed together, he grinned. So, married to a vampire king and crowned a queen. How's that for a plot twist? Pretty good plot twist. Elena glanced over at Dominic, who was dancing with Lily now, the child standing on his feet and giggling as he twirled her. Best decision I ever made. River's expression turned serious. You know I'm proud of you, right? You could have walked away from all this, stayed safe, but you didn't. You chose to be brave. Elena's eyes prickled with tears. I chose to be here. The bravery was just a side effect. Still counts. River hugged her tight. Thanks for showing me that impossible things can happen, that life can surprise you even when everything seems hopeless. Right back at you, little brother. You fought through impossible odds too. We're both fighters. Must be genetic. The night stretched long and lovely. Elena danced with everyone, Dominic, River, Lily, even Lady Moira, who proved surprisingly graceful for someone so ancient. Finally, as the moon reached its peak, Dominic swept Elena into one last waltz. The other guests faded back, giving them space, giving them this moment. Happy? He asked. So happy I might explode. Please don't. The cleanup would be terrible. His eyes gleamed with mischief. Elena laughed, pulling him closer. I love you. Did I mention that? Once or twice, but I never get tired of hearing it. Good, because I plan to say it approximately 10,000 more times. I'll hold you to that. They danced until the stars faded and dawn threatened the horizon. Danced until Lily fell asleep in River's arms and the last guest departed. Danced because they could, because they were Elivev, or close enough because they'd found each other against all odds. Elena stood in the same garden where everything had begun, watching Lily practice her transitions. The girl was 10 now, no longer tiny, growing into her power and grace. She moved with vampire speed, learning to control the abilities that had nearly killed her 4 years ago. Her ice powers were formidable, now strong enough to freeze an entire room in seconds, precise enough to create delicate frost patterns on a single rose petal. You're doing great, Elena called out. But remember, control is more important than speed. Lily nodded, slowing her movements, focusing. When she finally stopped, she was barely winded, a far cry from the frail child who'd collapsed at the nocturne. How was that? Perfect. Your mother would be proud. The words slipped out before Elena realized what she'd said. She'd never referred to herself that way before, always careful to honor Isabel's memory. Lily's eyes went wide. Then she was running, crossing the distance in a blink, throwing herself into Elena's arms. You mean it. You're really my mom. Elena held her tight. If you'll have me, I know I can't replace your birth mother. You're not replacing anyone. You're Elena. You're mom. You're mine. Lily's voice was fierce. And I'm yours. Forever, right? Forever, Elena confirmed, her throat tight. Dominic appeared from the house carrying a tray with drinks and snacks. He set it down on the garden table before joining them, pulling both into his arms. What did I miss? I have a mom now, Lily announced proudly. Officially. Dominic's smile was brighter than the sun. A family. A real family. The best family, Lily declared. Elena couldn't argue with that. Later, after Lily had gone to bed and the house was quiet, Elena and Dominic sat in the library. Their favorite spot. She was writing in her journal, documenting everything so she wouldn't forget when centuries had passed. What are you writing? Dominic asked. Our story. How we started. How we got here. And how does it end? Elena closed the journal, turning to face him. It doesn't. That's the whole point. We get forever remember, so our story doesn't end. It just keeps going. New chapters, new adventures, new memories. Dominic pulled her close. I like that. An endless story. The best kind. Outside, the moon rose over the garden where Lily had nearly died 4 years ago, where Elena had whispered stay and refused to let a child slip away, where a single act of compassion had changed 3 lives forever. But it had changed more than 3 lives, Elena knew. Word had spread through the vampire world. Other families were hiring human companions, now treating them with respect instead of contempt. Elena had established an informal academy teaching humans vampire etiquette and self-defense. 19 graduates so far, all thriving in their positions. Catherine Sterling, freed from the weight of compulsion and guilt, sent quarterly donations to the academy, her way of atoning for a cruelty that hadn't been entirely her own. The vampire world was changing, slowly but changing, all because a waitress had chosen to help instead of walking away. Elena leaned against Dominic's chest, listening to the absence of his heartbeat, feeling the cold that no longer bothered her. River was at Harvard pursuing his dreams of medical research. Lily was healthy and happy and loved. Seraphine sent letters every month, slowly rebuilding trust with the daughter she'd nearly destroyed. Julian, 3 years into his 50-year sentence, sent a letter last week asking for forgiveness, the first time he'd shown genuine remorse. And Elena had found her forever. "I stayed," she whispered into the quiet. "And in staying, I found everything I didn't know I needed." Dominic kissed the top of her head. We both did. In the garden, roses bloomed crimson under the moonlight. Inside, a family built from impossible choices held each other close. And somewhere in the space between human and vampire, between temporary and eternal love, wrote its own ending. Not the end, just forever.